How's it going, my fellow game-loving humans? My name is Quimbley, and I'm here to talk about a game called Flesh and Blood. Now, this channel is going to be dedicated to all things Flesh and Blood because this game has really caught my interest, and I've only played 4 games and have basically thrown my wallet into oblivion, grabbing a bunch of different stuff from this game. So a quick little history. What is this game? Who made it? What's going on? What's the gist of it? So this game, Flesh and Blood, is brought to us by a company in New Zealand known as Legend Stories Studios. Now, what's really caught my interest from this company is that they really care about the quality of their work. They cut no corners here. They have really showed what games should be all about. Now, I come from a history of playing Magic the Gathering and Keyforge. I still love Keyforge, don't get me wrong, but if you've played Keyforge, sometimes the card stock feels a little weak. I've had cards with like air bubbles in them before. I don't know if you've experienced that. If you happen to play Keyforge, if you have, please let me know below some of the crazy things that you've seen in that game. But this company uses the same printing company as Magic the Gathering, so it's super high quality, and their art is super fantastic as well. I can do a whole video about how much I love their art, how much I love the company, what they're doing for local game stores, but I need to withhold. Let's actually talk about the game. Chances are, if you happen to land on this video, you're like, what's Flesh and Blood? I'm searching for that. What's going on here? What is this game, and what is it all about? So, a quick summary about this game. It's an LCG. So it's LCG similar to Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, all those type of cards. However, unlike those cards, which is usually a bunch of creatures out ready to attack the opponent for you in your glory, you happen to be a hero. You're a single hero locked into combat with another hero, just dueling it out one-on-one. So dive a little bit deeper. There's multiple heroes as of this video. There's currently only 2 sets out, with 4 heroes per set. The next set coming out later in August seems to be more of a filler type thing for this, giving heroes more gear and equipment, and better action cards, or more action cards, not necessarily better, going from there. So let's actually talk about this game. What is this game all about? What do you do? What's the win conditions? Why would you want to get into it? So with all of that being said, let's just move all these extra IRA decks that I have that I'm going to give to fellow gamers in my community here in Portland, Oregon, to try to get my local store super into Flesh and Blood, so I have people to play with when this pandemic comes to an end. But let's focus exactly on that deck. What is this deck for? What's it all about? And essentially, it's what you would expect from a free deck. It's dummied down. This wouldn't be a super competitive deck. You probably wouldn't want to bring this to any type of sealed format based on the rules of sealed. Looks like there's not 60 cards in there. But yeah, so coming into it, this deck is meant to play another deck that's exactly like it. So essentially, Ira is fighting her twin sister for some type of battle raging on. So I'd love to know more about the lore of this game, but I'm still kind of new to it myself. I might do a lore video on that later. Go ahead and comment down below if you want to know more about the lore of this game, and I can hunt that down. I know Legend Stories Studios sends books out to game stores with full art, all about the story of it. I'd love to get my hands on one of those, but alas, I'm not a game store. I just gotta hope that my local game store gets it and they allow me to look at it and read it. So coming into this, we can see that we have these 2 cards out here, and let's just go more into detail about what these cards are. So let's start from the right. This happens to be your hero card, and every deck needs a hero card. So this is Ira Crimson Haze, and they happen to have this text block stating your second attack each turn gains +1 attack. That little yellow symbol stands for attack, and we'll be getting into that more when we actually show a demo hand or a demo round of something that might happen. And then the bottom left, we have our intellect or wisdom. I'm not quite sure, can't remember off the top of my head exactly what that is. All my brain seems to process is that is your hand size. So when you draw every round, you draw up to that number. So if you happen to somehow got 7 cards in your hand, you won't draw. If you have 1 card in your hand, you'll draw 3, so on so from there. I'm pretty sure you get the idea of how that works if you've happened to play a card game before. In the bottom right, we see Ira's health total, and that's 20. Now, typically in a standard deck, you would use an older hero, and that's something we'll talk about later. But right here, we have 20 health. So this is our hero, and like I mentioned, this artwork is just absolutely fantastic. Look at that border. That is just, They got me with this beautiful border. It really has collected me and has made me throw my wallet, even though I've only played 4 games of this game myself. So I happen to be wrong about anything here. Please let me know below. Correct me if I'm wrong. Everyone makes mistakes. So coming over here to the left, we have our weapon. Now, you could have in different decks 2 weapons. There's another ninja deck over here, Katsu, and he has 2 katanas, but Ira here happens to have a 2-handed one. And let's see what's going on with this ourselves. So we see that's one beautiful weapon, beautiful art once again. No art in this do I not like. So just know every time I show you the art, I'm probably screaming, oh, wow, that is gorgeous in my head. So I don't repeat myself over and over again. So we're seeing that once per turn action, we can pay 1 resource, that's what that red symbol stands for, to attack with this sword. After we attack, we gain go again, which means when this action resolves, gain 1 action point. And when we swing with it, it only has 1 attack designated down there to the bottom left. So when you do play this game, essentially you get 1 action point, and an action point can be used on action cards. The most typical action cards are attacks, but there can be items such as potions, or there's a class called Mechanologist that has quite a bit of items. But if you play it and you don't have go again or another action point from a card giving it to you, that's essentially your turn. I have played a Mechanologist deck where I didn't quite understand it when I played it for the first time, and I laid out an item when I was like, oh, poo, I should have done all these combos before I laid this item. That should have been my last play. So that's important to note. You get 1 action point unless a card you play states otherwise. So let's go ahead and pull up the deck here. I'm going to place it over here in accordance to this sheet here that tells us to place the hero, place the weapon left of the hero. Then we have something called the arsenal that goes down below here, below our hero and weapon. And then to the right, we put our deck, which has a pitch, a graveyard, and a banished to the sides of it. Due to me recording with my phone, I don't know how much of that battlefield I'm going to get, but we can use our imaginations. Or if one day I'm fortunate enough to get a Flesh and Blood playmat, I'll have beautifully designated areas for the cards. So let's come here. So as I mentioned before, our hero has this 4 wisdom or intellect. Actually, I'm just going to correct myself now. I'm sure the little guide tells us here, start game with your hero weapon in the arena and the cards in hand equal to, it just says blue. Doesn't tell us what it's called. Maybe it says up here. Once again, comment, oh wait, hand size? All right, maybe it's not intellect, maybe it's just hand size. I'll live with that. My head wants to call it intellect, but let's just call it hand size. So then it states here, each turn has 2 phases, an action phase and an end of turn phase. To gain action points, pitch cards from your hand to the pitch zone. When you play an action, a combat chain opens. The first action is Chain Link 1. If an action has Go Again, you can play another action after it resolves as Chain Link 2, and so on, so on. So there's a little blurb I was mentioning. You basically get 1 action point unless a card states otherwise. It is free to defend with cards from your hand to a chain link. After defending cards, if any, are confirmed, only reactions can be played to the chain link. Damage is calculated by the yellow spear symbol. Less total the shield. All non-weapon cards go to the graveyard when the combat chain closes. During your end of turn phase, if your arsenal is empty, you may put a card from your hand face down into your arsenal. You can play cards from arsenal in a future turn. You can't pitch or defend from arsenal. You can only play cards from arsenal, which includes defense reaction cards. To end your turn, put all cards from your pitch zone on your bottom of your deck, draw up your blue symbol or hand size, and unused resources are lost. On the first turn of the game, both players draw cards up to their hand size at end of turn. Reduce your opponent's health to 0 to win the game. So pretty basic rules. At least so I thought when I first played. I was like, okay, bash your opponent's face in, win the game. But what was not mentioned there, and that might just been a jargle of words to you, is when you defend with cards in your hand, you're going to have less cards to attack your opponent with during your turn. So let's actually see kind of what a play might look like with Ira here playing someone else that's playing Ira. So for the sake of this, I did stack the deck to make it kind of more understandable so we can talk a little bit about the cards that we're going to see in this hand. So let's look at the anatomy of these cards. So as we see, we have this Whirling Mist Blossom who happens to have the same board as Ira, which makes sense because if you come down here to the box, it's an Ira specialization. So you may only have Whirling Mist Blossom in your deck if your hero is Ira. So that must just be Ira's special border, which is fantastic. It's a beautiful border. Maybe they'll re-release an adult Ira that has 40 health and does more crazy stuff later on, or reuse this border because I absolutely love the art of that border. So if Whirling Mist Blossom hits, and it's the second or higher chain link in a row to hit, draw 2 cards, and then go again. And as we see here, it does 2 damage and it has 2 defense if we decide to defend with this card. At the top, we can see that we see the name, Whirling Mist Blossom, but at the left is its pitch value. So if we decide to pitch this card, which means remove it from our hand, place it in the pitch located here in my very crooked play area, stay there, Mr. Card, we can pitch that for 2 resources. So now we have 2 resources to place something in our hand. So coming from here, we can play this one that has 1 resource, or this, well, actually, this is the only one that costs resources. Ninjas are very efficient that way, and I'll be doing more talk about the beginner decks later, covering each one of them in depth. I played them, figure out how they work. But for this instance, let's just keep going with what this turn might look like. So coming into this, let's go ahead and think about what we might want to do. It's our first turn. Let's say I'm playing an opponent across for me, also using Ira. So let's say they have Ira. I know I have plenty of decks over here to the left of Ira, but I'm not going to open them since they're for other people. But let's go ahead and see what might be the best play here. So since this card says that, you know, Whirling Mist Blossom hits and it's the second or higher chain link in a row, draw 2 cards, so maybe we don't want to use that. And as we can see here, it's a ninja action attack, so this can only be in ninja decks. And then we also see this card, Lunging Press. Target attack action card gains +1. This is a generic attack reaction. So since this is a reaction and not an action, this can't just be played by itself. This has to be played during the reaction step, which I'll dive a little bit further into. We also seem to have something called Head Jab. Absolutely. I knew I was going to say it again, but I got to. Love the art. Even though it doesn't match this quality they have, that cartoony punch is still just fantastic. But let's get going. So as we can see, this has a blue bar and 3 pitch. So just to note, each one of these bar colors will tell you exactly how much pitch value it has. So blues will always have 3, reds will always have 1, and yellows will always have 2. Now, some cards happen to only have 1 color variant of itself, but for most cases, they'll have 3 color variants. There'll be a blue one, a yellow one, and a red one. Usually the red one will have the most value. So pulling off from the top of my head, because I'm not quite sure if there's yellow or red head jabs. But if there's a yellow head jab, it might have 2 attack instead. If there's a red, it might have 3 attack instead. So on and so forth from there. So you usually want to play your red ones as attacks and use your blues and sometimes yellows as your pitch. But that's also kind of a more metagame thing. And we could get more into advanced play in another video. But for this is basically just a demo of how this game works. So looking over this, looks like I want to save this for my second attack. Torrent Tempo might be a good first attack. Ooh, it does 5. So it does 5, so if Torrent Tempo hits, it gains Go again. So I kind of need to hit with this card in order to be able to play my Whirling Mist Blossom. So in order to kind of ensure that this hits, this 5 value, maybe I want to keep my Lunging Press to add more attack to it, make sure that goes through to the other side. So with that said, let's say this is the beginning of my turn and I want to go ahead and I just want to go slap my opponent silly with my really cool katana, which I'm not going to because I'm going to be using an action first. So let's go ahead and play. So let's get rid of Head Jab. It only does 1 attack, but we're going to get 3 resources from it. So I'll go ahead and pitch that into my pitch zone, and now I have 3 resources. I tend to like to use a dice up here just to remind me and my opponent how many resources we have. But an important thing to also note is you can't necessarily pitch more resources than you need. So I couldn't just be like, you know what, I want to get rid of these cards so my hand size goes down so when I draw I can grab more cards and just pitch all of them and throw this out there. You can only pitch and then use it and so forth from there. That might be a little confusing, and I'll clarify a little bit later on exactly what that means. So going into this, I'm going to want to hit my Torrent Tempo first. Since Whirling Mist Blossom gets a bonus at the end of it, I want to go with Torrent Tempo, followed by a Lunging Press for a reaction in case they block. I might just do it anyways, you know, just in case. I want that to land so I can play my Whirling Mist Blossom. So I'm going to tell my opponent, you know, I paid 3 resources. I'm going to pay this 1, so now I have 2 ephemeral resources located here, and I'm going to go and start the combat chain with this. So I'm coming at you for 5 damage. Now, let's grab my imaginary opponent's hand, which I don't know what's in it. I'm definitely lying. I know what's in it. I planted this. So let's say, ooh, that's 5 damage. I have 20 health. I definitely don't want to take, you know, 25% of my health at the very beginning of this game. So if I don't want to, I can look at my options. So as we see, I have a Head Jab worth 2 shield. I have Springboard Somersault, a generic defense reaction. So much like the attack reaction, this is the defense version. It has 2 shield. And if this wasn't my first play in the game, if this was in my arsenal, if I played it from my arsenal, I would get +2 more shield. Then we have Brutal Assault, and that's a 3 shield. and then we have Flying Kick, which is a 3 shield as well. So now I get to choose how many cards I want to defend against. 5 is pretty big, and maybe I know this deck. Maybe I'm thinking, oh man, I really don't want that Whirling Mist Blossom to sure show up and them do more crazy shenanigans. So maybe I want to defend with more cards than I think are needed. So let's go ahead, pick some here. So I have a 3/1 and another 3/1. That's 6. So that's one more defense than needed to block exactly what the board state is now. So I'll just go ahead and put that on the chain. So the current board state now is player 1 attacking with 5 damage, and then player 2 has 6 defense. So essentially what will happen is I'm protected by 1 more. I like that. So I was looking at my hand, I was like, oh, you know what? Even my lunging press wouldn't get through. It'll only add 1, it'll equal out. Maybe I don't necessarily want to throw it in there because it'll just be a waste of a card. So now I can go, all right, I have no attack reactions. And then player 2 would be like, yeah, I have no defense reactions, everything's solid, and then that chain comes to a close. So no damage is done. This goes into the graveyard, these go into the opponent's graveyard. And now we go off to player 2's turn. But before that, what you can do before you end your turn is put a card in your arsenal. So since I happen to have 2 cards in my hand, I could put one of these in my arsenal and keep the other one in my hand. So looking these over, you know, maybe I'll draw 3 more cards and I'll get something cool that'll allow me to play this second. So I'll go ahead and put Lunging Press into my arsenal face down, and that basically gives you an extra card for whenever you want to use it. Only problem is you have to play that card from your arsenal in order to put something else in your arsenal. If I happen to have these 2 cards in my hand and something else happen to be in my arsenal, then I'm stuck with both of these in my hand and I only get to draw 2 cards. So it's kind of a rule of thumb to always ditch your cards or try to do as much as possible with all the cards in your hand to hit a little bit more. Now, like I mentioned, I did have 2 ephemeral resources in play. So let's take a step back. I could have done a little bit more. I actually could play this, and if Whirling Mist Blossom hits and it's the 2nd or higher chain link, I actually do get to benefit from it. So let's take a step back and actually act like I didn't end my turn. So let's say I still have those 2 resources. I decide to play Whirling Mist, coming in at my opponent for 2 damage. So now this is coming in at my opponent for 2 damage. They see I have 1 card in my hand. I have 1 more resource left. There might be a trick up my sleeve with this card. This might be an attack reaction that does something crazy. But right now, all I'm seeing is 2 damages coming at me. And maybe I happen to want to keep a head jab. Maybe I just love this card and I have some ideas of how I can play that next turn. So I just decide to do, say, I'm not blocking with anything, or actually, I'm not blocking with anything. Then player 1 can be like, oh, cool, you know what? I'll just use this attack reaction for 1 extra damage. So that's a total of 3 coming through. So player 1 decided to do an attack reaction to kind of boost their attack moving forward. And from there, maybe I'm like, as a player 2, going, hey, you know, I don't want to take that much pain. Let's just go ahead and I'll do a defense reaction of the springboard somersault and only take a total of 1 damage. So 1 damage is coming through. I would take that, and then player 2 would continue to their turn. So when it does come down to it, at the end of the first player's round, both players get to draw up to their opening hand size, kind of alleviate the whole pain that happens because you only draw during your turn typically. And you know, if you were player 1 and you came in for something bananas like a 20 power attack, and player 2 defended with all of their cards, then it wouldn't be very fun for player 2, because their next turn they don't get to do anything but draw 4 cards, and they'll always be on the defense for probably the remainder of the game. With that said, that is about it by the beginning of this game. I hope that was kind of clear. This is my first YouTube video, but I'm going to be bringing you more content in regards to pack openings, how much value you can get out of whole booster boxes, how much value you can get out of cases, how much of a collection you can build, say, with a case. That's going to be the whole content going forward, all about opening packs, talk about a little bit of the formats. But yeah, my next videos will be all about these guys, the starter decks. What's so great about these starter decks? How do each one of these heroes play? What's their play type like? So on forth from there. And then I have some more ideas moving forward from there as well. So please go ahead, check it out. Subscribe if you like. I'm not going to force you to. Don't smash it. Please don't smash the subscribe button. Please gently tap it. It did nothing wrong to you. Thank you.